Calvin and I slept together for 7 years. Then he told me he was tired of me. When the war ended, he no longer needed my psychic stabilization, so he couldn't wait to cast me aside and propose to his childhood sweetheart. I had no choice but to accept the fiancé assigned to me by the White Tower. Later, he forgot we had broken up and would stand below my apartment building day after day, crying like a fool. I just drew the curtains, so he wouldn't disturb my daughter's sweet dreams. Calvin didn't try to hide his proposal from me. His friends formed a circle in the busiest plaza, enclosing him and his childhood sweetheart. I saw it the moment I stepped out of the base. Calvin knelt on one knee before her, presenting her with blue roses and a star diamond medal. That was the medal he and I had earned together, risking life and limb. It was the White Tower's highest honor. After the peace treaty was signed, sentinels no longer had to go to the battlefield. Life returned to a quiet normal. They desperately needed a spectacle like this to get their dopamine flowing. A brave and distinguished war hero and a pure, innocent girl symbolizing a beautiful future. The image of them kissing would be the perfect final chapter to the war. Everyone was shouting, "Marry him! Marry him!" But at the peak of the excitement, Calvin's spirit animal, a gerfalcon, flew from his back and landed on my shoulder, a short distance away. Only then did Calvin notice me. The crowd fell silent. They all knew that Calvin and I had been together for 7 years. Just last week, we had been sleeping in the same bed. I'm a guide. Calvin is an S-class sentinel. Our compatibility rate is 80%. During the war, that meant my stabilization abilities could rapidly repair any mental damage Calvin sustained, allowing him to fight without reservation. In peacetime, it didn't mean much. For 7 years, we had faced the most dangerous battlefields together, and our bodies had joined countless times. I thought we had chosen each other. I never imagined Calvin saw it all as just a mission. Once he was certain he'd never have to fight again, he cleanly and efficiently applied to dissolve our pairing. Why? I'm tired of it. What else? We never bonded. After a guide and sentinel form a permanent bond, their compatibility rate reaches 100%, and the efficiency of their psychic connection is maximized. They also become bound for life, an inseparable part of one another. No matter how perilous the situation, Calvin had never taken that final step with me. When did he start getting tired of me? A sudden exhaustion washed over me. Fine, I said. He was surprised and also visibly relieved. He briefly thanked me for my 7 years of care, told me he was in love with his childhood sweetheart, and then slung a pre-packed backpack over his shoulder and walked out the door. After 7 years of living together, all his belongings fit into a single bag. The signs had been there all along. Congratulations. I was the one to break the silence, walking into the crowd with the gerfalcon on my shoulder. The childhood sweetheart sensed something from the crowd's reaction and nervously clutched Calvin's sleeve. Calvin moved her behind him and shot me a warning look. Even though I had no ability to harm them, it made his position clear. I had no intention of making a scene. I stopped at a polite distance. You two make a perfect couple. And you are? She asked. I'm Colonel Calvin's guide. You can call me Juliet. Her face stiffened. She remembered. Calvin and I had been decorated together. He was a war hero and so was I. Everyone knew our story. And the methods a guide used to stabilize her sentinel, that was common knowledge. Calvin rushed to explain, you know how it is, sentinels can easily get sensory overload in battle. If they're not stabilized in time, they can go berserk. It was all part of the mission, her eyes reddened. So, you two, we were just colleagues, I answered. Calvin seemed a bit stunned by how cooperative I was. Most of the people around us looked uncomfortable, but a few chimed in to support him. Yeah, that's right. Just colleagues. Back then, the White Tower assigned all the Sentinel guide pairings based on rank and compatibility. The war's over now. We should be true to ourselves. So that's how they saw it. It made sense. They were Calvin's friends. Their attitude was a reflection of his own. I raised my arm, letting the gerfalcon fly back to Calvin's shoulder. Standing beside him, the girl flinched, instinctively raising a hand to shield herself. The gerfalcon tilted its head and nuzzled the back of her hand. The fear on her face dissolved, replaced by a joyful wonder. "What is this?" she asked Calvin. A smile involuntarily touched his lips. "It's a spirit animal," he explained in a soft, gentle voice. "Only sentinels and guides have them. It's a physical manifestation of my psyche." His tenderness astonished me. In our 7 years together, he had been reserved, cold, his voice always devoid of warmth. He kept everyone at arm's length, and even when we were intimate, his expression remained impassive, like a robot going through the motions. I thought that was just his nature. Now I saw it was probably just his nature with me. The girl blushed as the gerfalcon grew closer to her. The atmosphere was improving. My continued presence felt inappropriate. "I have things to do, so I won't disturb you any longer." I hadn't taken 10 steps before Calvin called out, "Juliet." I turned to look at him. With his arm around the girl's shoulders, he said to me with grave sincerity, "Lily wants your blessing." Ah, so her name was Lily. I smiled at them. "I wish you a lifetime of happiness together." Calvin's successful proposal made the papers. It was good for post-war sentinel integration into society, so it was promoted as a model case. By the time the papers hit the stands, I was already in a car headed for Sector A. Normally, after Calvin dissolved our pairing, I could have gone to the Guide Institute and become a regular guide, maintaining the day-to-day stability of other sentinels. But I was an extremely rare S-class, and the only guide with a compatibility rate of over 60% with any sentinel. The base wasn't going to let my talents go to waste. I had no choice but to accept the White Towers assignment and meet my new partner. Oh, not partner anymore. Fiance. My fiancé was the son of Count Guzin. I'd heard he was also an S-class, but he was an unreliable character who had never studied sentinel skills or set foot on a battlefield. The other sentinels secretly called him the S-class reject. I had the car stop at the manor gate. Just as I stepped out, I heard a commotion from inside. A foul-smelling wind carrying broken branches and dead leaves rushed toward me. I instinctively stepped back just as a white figure, accompanied by shocked cries, crashed to the ground right in front of me, landing flat on his back. He lay there, stunned. I could see his torn, beige courtly shirt, his messy blonde hair, and his long limbs curled up in pain. Out of professional habit as a guide, I took a step forward to check his injuries. But before I could touch him, he quickly lifted his head. I saw a pair of eyes bluer than any lake, a face as delicate as a porcelain doll's, and feathers and blood at the corner of his mouth. The beautiful young man had a dead bird clamped in his teeth. He scrambled to his feet and stared straight at me. Alarm bells went off in my head. I was about to retreat when he suddenly dropped the bird and lunged at me on all fours. The world spun as he pinned me to the ground. His fingers closed around my neck as he tilted his head, observing me like prey. I noticed his body temperature was high, and his pupils were semi-dilated. Blood trickled down his jaw and dripped onto my pale face.
Colonel Juliette.
"Stabilize him," the butler shouted as he ran toward us. Realizing the young man was in a state of psychic distress, I quickly reached up, cupped his face, and released my pheromones. My spirit animal, a white serpent, slithered from my sleeve, climbed up my arm, and flickered its tongue at him. I established a connection, sent out my psychic tendrils, and invaded his mindscape. It was like looking at a burning, black wasteland. The butler and maids held their breath, afraid to disturb me. But something went wrong. The young man quickly threw up a barrier, and my psychic energy couldn't break through. If I couldn't push forward, then I had to. Without hesitation, I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulled myself up, and kissed his blood-stained lips. A kiss. I prayed this level of physical contact would be enough to stabilize him. Of course, going further would be more effective, but this was all I could do in front of everyone. The young man remained motionless, accepting my comfort, and I could feel his state gradually stabilizing. Just as I was about to pull away, a large hand pressed against the back of my head. He took control, deepening the kiss and seeking my lips and tongue. His eyes were half closed, his long lashes trembling, the lake-like blue of his irises clouded with a mesmerizing haze. This was bad. My compatibility rate with him seemed to be incredibly high. An unfamiliar spark ignited at the base of my spine and shot all the way up to my skull. The heat rose, and a dark current churned within me. I was caught off guard as a bonding fever was triggered. Then, just as suddenly, he released me. I saw the haze in his eyes quickly condense into tears that rolled down his beautiful cheeks. I killed the little bird, he murmured to himself, lost in a daze. I hadn't expected this reaction after he stabilized. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The maids helped me to my feet. I pressed a hand to my chest, secretly trying to calm my own turmoil. The butler, however, seemed relieved. He reached out to help the young man. Master Leyon. Leyon sniffled. I thought I was a cat. I awakened as a guide early, entering the White Tower at 9. I grew up surrounded by decisive, no-nonsense soldiers. I had never seen such a delicate sentinel before. The butler, accustomed to this, took out a handkerchief and wiped Leyon's face clean. Please forgive the scene. I shook my head to show it was fine. Once Leyon was standing straight, I realized he was a good half a head taller than me. He had to be over 6'3". I also noticed his broad shoulders and long legs, the powerful muscles visible through the tears in his shirt. It seemed at odds with his greenhouse flower demeanor. Leyon finally noticed me, his expression still dazed. You are, hello. I'm Juliet, your fiance. I held out my hand to him. The moment he heard my name, his eyes widened, and his face flushed a deep red, as if it had been scalded. Master Leyon, the butler prompted. He didn't take my hand. Instead, he jolted back 2 steps and fled from my sight in a panic, leaving only a clumsy afterimage. I think I was beginning to understand why he couldn't serve on the battlefield. My fiancé was a delicate flower, completely unable to care for himself. He was shy, sullen, and behaved strangely. In the villa's study, while I presented the marriage certificate and my identification from the White Tower to the butler, Leyon hid behind the door, peeking out with just half of his head, nervously watching my every move. I suspected he might have a developmental disability, but the White Tower hadn't given me any warnings to that effect. So, I turned and offered him a kind, friendly smile. Our eyes met, and 2 streams of tears immediately rolled down his face. It was baffling and infuriating. The real decision-maker in this manner was clearly the butler. He lavished praise on me, talking about my countless merits during my service, my seamless coordination with Calvin in several key battles, and how we were the Empire's most celebrated sentinel guide pair. Then he asked for my impression of Master Leyon. He must have meant our compatibility rate. I recalled the feeling of my contact with Leyon, and the heat I had just suppressed began to rise again. I can't say for sure, I said confidently, but if we could get it tested, I believe our compatibility rate would be over 90%. That's not what I meant, the butler said. Then what did you mean? I asked, humbly seeking clarification. Never mind, he said. He stood up from behind the desk, impeccably polite, a constant smile on his face. Master Leyon is very fond of you. He hopes to pair with you as soon as possible. If you have no objections, we will announce your engagement to the public in 2 days. Is there anything I need to do? You've had a long journey and must be tired. Please get some rest. I wish you pleasant dreams tonight. That evening, a maid showed me to a guest room. After washing up, I lay down and quickly fell into a deep sleep. I had a dream, perhaps because I had been with Calvin for so long. Even though we had dissolved our pairing, I still dreamed of him. I dreamed I had entered Calvin's mindscape. A blizzard was raging across the silent ice field. His gerfalcon circled high above, letting out a mournful cry. I anxiously searched for Calvin, spinning around like a headless fly before it dawned on me. I looked down and saw him, lying beneath the ice at my feet. His face was pale, his eyes were closed, and his hands were crossed over his chest, cradling that bouquet of blue roses. I dropped to my knees and pounded on the ice, but I saw the blue roses suddenly begin to grow at a terrifying rate. Thorny vines shot out from between his fingers, wrapping tightly around his body. I screamed and shot up in bed. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw the green light on the communicator I always kept by my side flashing non-stop. The war was over. Who would be calling me? Calvin? Puzzled, I answered the call. After a moment of faint breathing, Calvin's voice came through the communicator, just as I'd expected. I heard you're getting married. Yes, that was fast. So were you. I was just stating a fact. I don't know how Calvin interpreted it, but he started to sigh. I knew what? Our situations are different. You don't have to marry someone out of spite just to get back at me. I was speechless, so I said nothing. Calvin continued, oblivious. The war is over. You don't have to follow the White Tower's orders anymore. If you're being forced into this, I can find a way to get you out, I patiently asked. And then what? Calvin fell silent. A moment later, as if he had made a great resolution, he said, I'll find a place to settle you. For the sake of our years together, I won't just leave you on your own. That familiar sense of weariness washed over me again. That won't be necessary, I told him. The other end of the line went silent again. After a short while, a derisive laugh echoed through the speaker. You're right. Colonel Juliet is always dutiful, always does whatever the White Tower tells her to. I was getting ahead of myself. His tone made me extremely uncomfortable. Even though the White Tower was the reason Calvin and I were paired, in the 7 years we were together, I had given him all the affection I could muster and did everything a lover would do. He didn't want to continue, and I gave him a graceful exit. I had no reason to accept any blame from him. I said, I'm getting married of my own free will, and I hope. Calvin didn't let me finish. He cut off the communication. The night was cool as water, and shadows of trees swayed gently outside the window. When my thoughts returned to the present, I realized my body temperature was rising. A bonding fever. This physiological phenomenon could make a sentinel or guide lose their ability to think, turning them into a primal beast in heat. It was only because of my extreme emotional stability that I had managed to suppress it since the afternoon, but I was at my limit. My white serpent suddenly slipped from my wrist and slithered silently toward the guest room door. Curious to see where it was going, I got out of bed and followed it quietly. It moved down the corridor, up the stairs, turned a corner, and disappeared onto a terrace. Yes, I got my wish. I heard a man's voice. It sounded like Leyon, but it also didn't. Leyon's voice was very distinct. Clear, slightly high-pitched, his speech unhurried, his emotions always apparent, just like him. The voice I was hearing now was several octaves lower, lazy, and a bit wild. It was captivating. Suddenly very curious about the owner of this voice, I started up the stairs. I had only taken 2 steps when my foot kicked a loose stone. The voice stopped. I quickened my pace and stepped onto the terrace. It was empty, of course. Only a cool breeze brushed against my face. Disappointed, I was about to turn back. What are you doing here? I heard Leyon's voice. A soft hissing sound came from the shadows, and my white serpent emerged, slithering past me and toward the figure behind me. I turned and saw Leyon bending down to pick up the serpent. He seemed to have followed me, his gaze soft and concerned. The night wind lifted the collar of his shirt, the soft fabric gently brushing against his smooth cheek. The moonlight shimmered in his pale golden hair. Ah, so beautiful. The dazed white serpent coiled around Leyon's arm, raised its head to nuzzle his cheek affectionately, and then dove into the collar of his shirt, making no attempt to hide its urges. Leyon was caught off guard and fumbled to pull the serpent out of his clothes, not noticing that I had walked right up to him. I wrapped my arms around his neck. He noticed and reached out to steady my waist, but his hand retreated nervously as soon as it made contact. His hands now pressed tightly to his sides. And Miss Juliet, what are you doing? Call me Juliet.
Gigi Juliette.
My bonding fever has started. I leaned forward, pressing him against the wall, and bent my head to kiss him. Leyon jerked his head away in a panic, and my lips landed on his flushed ear. We should probably wait until we're sure of our feelings for each other before, he said. I was a little confused. Didn't you want to pair with me as soon as possible? Leyon lowered his head, and I couldn't see his expression. Yes, but if it's just because of the White Tower, perhaps it was desire, but looking at his bashful expression, all I wanted to do was kiss him. So I did. My white serpent echoed my action, coiling up from his neck and, along with my lips, nibbled at his cheek. I murmured, "Leyon, let me be your guide. I need you." Leon's entire body went rigid. After a few seconds, he seemed to make up his mind. He took a deep breath and swept me into his arms. His muscles were stronger than I had imagined. My feet left the ground, and I felt as light as a cloud. Then he started to run. I bounced in his arms, forced to cling tightly to his neck. My chest was a storm of thunder and rain, pounding relentlessly. He threw open the bedroom door and practically tossed me onto the bed. He pinned my hands down, looking down at me, his eyes glittering like stars in the night. Then he opened the nightstand drawer, took out an inhibitor shot, and jabbed it into my arm. The inhibitor worked quickly, and my feverish heat slowly began to fade. Leyon let me go and sat beside me, his face full of apology. I silently got up from the bed, straightened my clothes, and walked out the door without saying a word. For the next 2 days, the butler familiarized me with the manor's affairs, seemingly treating me as its future mistress. Leyon would appear occasionally, but he always became a target for my spirit animal. If he got close, the white serpent would hiss at him. If he brought me flowers, it would knock them away with its tail. If he tried to speak to me, it would wrap around his neck and squeeze. It got to the point where if he came within 5 steps of me, the serpent would shoot out like an arrow and chase him around the grounds, nipping at him. After Leyon was once again driven away from me by my serpent, the butler finally asked, "Are you angry with the young master?" I smiled. "What? No. I just felt that one of us needed to leave the planet, and he was the more suitable candidate. In that case, would you be willing to accept this?" Unable to approach me himself, Leyon had sent the butler with a bouquet of roses. They were a bit ragged, with some petals missing and stems of uneven lengths, but the ribbon was tied beautifully. It looked like Leyon had picked them himself. Tucked inside was a card with a drawing of a crying puppy and a short, sweet message. "Your devoted puppy, kissing you 32 million times a minute." I couldn't help but chuckle, imagining Leyon with that expression. When I put the card down and looked toward the figure who had been chased up an oak tree by my serpent, a warmth spread through my chest. On the day of our engagement announcement, Leyon was dressed formally. A white suit with gold embroidery made him look like a nobleman straight out of an oil painting. The reporters latched onto the fact that Leyon had never served on the battlefield. They asked me, a war hero, why I would choose to marry him and whether our union was a political one. I was prepared. I spoke of my admiration for the late Count Guzin, how his family had sacrificed their lives for peace, and my hope that the nation would treat the sole remaining heir of the Guzin family with kindness. As for the reason for our marriage, I turned to Leyon. Our eyes met. His gaze was deep and affectionate, filled with the same adoration as always. "Of course, it's because I love him." I gave him a kiss. He flushed a deep red, and in front of all the cameras, looked as if he were about to burst into tears. After the interview aired, the negative comments about Leyon multiplied. He went from being the S-class reject to the snot-nosed loser who got lucky. Fortunately, Leyon seemed to be eternally innocent and carefree, paying no mind to the rumors. After that, Leyon and I started spending more time together. Cattail Manor really was the perfect place for a retired guy to recuperate. We would read and picnic under the oak trees, plant flowers in the garden, spend whole days in the attic filled with books, swim in the wild lake behind the villa, and even help deliver a calf for a neighboring farmer. While I sunbathed, Leyon would set up an easel nearby and paint me. He tied his hair back, which made the blush on the tips of his ears clearly visible whenever he stole a glance at me. When he noticed me looking back, his eyelashes would flutter rapidly, and as I got closer, he would stiffen his neck and pretend not to have seen me. He seemed to really love me. When I asked him to teach me to paint, he held my hand so gently he barely applied any pressure. When I squeezed his hand back, he'd snatch it away like it was struck by lightning. When I wouldn't let him pull away and tickled his palm, he would tremble from the intense emotion. I discovered that day that he had quite the assets to expedite our pairing, I would deliberately arouse him whenever we established a mental connection. But he would always flee in a panic before I could go any deeper. With all the attention on us, our wedding was quickly scheduled. But 2 days before the ceremony, an unexpected guest arrived. Calvin showed up at Cattail Manor, bold as brass, carrying wedding gifts from our old comrades who couldn't attend. Of course, I wasn't delusional enough to think he was here to stop the wedding. He acted perfectly professional and businesslike. The butler said that with the wedding so close, he should just stay at the manor and leave after the ceremony. He stayed. That evening, while I was alone in the garden, packing soil around some newly planted sea star orchids, Calvin suddenly appeared behind me. He impatiently dragged me into a small utility shed nearby. "Juliet, help me." He got straight to the point. The moment he grabbed my hand, I could tell he was in a terrible state. His gerfalcon flew out from him and collapsed into my arms, as limp and weak as if it had the plague. Out of professional habit, I released my pheromones and extended my psychic tendrils to check on them. After all, sentinels are walking time bombs. Letting one detonate is never a good thing. If I could stabilize him, it was for the best. "How did you get into this state?" I asked casually. Calvin seemed to have been waiting for just that question, and the floodgates opened. I had no idea being with a civilian would be so stressful. I think I'm more exhausted than when I was at war. I've had to go to the Guide Institute for stabilization from regular guides, but Lily gets upset if I go too often. I didn't respond. It wasn't my place to comment on their affairs. The gerfalcon, soothed by my touch, closed its eyes contentedly and nuzzled against me. Watching it act so spoiled, a small smile touched my lips. Calvin suddenly spoke in a nostalgic tone. "I actually wanted to come the day you announced your engagement, but Lily kept finding excuses to delay me. I don't know if he was pushing his luck or just out of his mind, but he suddenly reached out, cupped the back of my neck, and leaned in to kiss me. I reacted instantly, pushing him away. "What do you think you're doing?" He froze for a moment. "Aren't you going to stabilize me?" I frowned. "Yes, but only with my psychic energy." Calvin looked disappointed. "Then how is that any different from the regular guides at the Institute?" So he came to me because he found the regular guides too inefficient. What did he think I was going to do with him? I was so angry I laughed. "Do you have any idea that I'm about to get married?" He seemed completely unprepared for that question and just stood there, stunned. I let go of the gerfalcon and turned to leave. Calvin instinctively grabbed my arm. "Don't go." I slapped him across the face. "Get out." Calvin looked at me in disbelief. His cheek was swollen, with 5 clear fingerprints imprinted on it. A guide's most important trait is emotional stability. As one of the best, I had almost never shown him any negative emotion. The disgust in my eyes stung him. It was as if he was only now realizing what he had just done. He froze on the spot. He stammered, trying to explain, "I thought it wouldn't be a big deal for you." He couldn't finish. I took a deep breath. "We've dissolved our pairing. I have no obligation to satisfy your needs. You can request medication and special aids from the Institute to assist with stabilization. I'm sure your dear wife will understand." Before I finished, Calvin's eyes suddenly reddened. "Dear wife? You don't care at all, do you?" I ignored him and turned to leave the shed. "Don't go. Don't leave," Calvin said urgently. "Are you that eager to abandon me? So annoying." Walking wasn't fast enough, so I started to run. "Juliet!" As Calvin's voice cracked into a shout, the temperature around me plummeted. Piercing gale slammed into my back. Hearing the howl of the wind, I spun around and was immediately engulfed in a blizzard that made it nearly impossible to see. Was he going berserk? When an S-class sentinel loses control, the devastation is like a natural disaster. There were so many civilians living at Cattail Manor. If he lost it now, what would happen to them? I immediately pulled out my communicator, intending to contact the nearby guards. The gerfalcon shrieked as it dove out of the whiteout, knocking the communicator from my hand with its wing. My white serpent shot out to bite it but was caught by the neck and flung aside. I frantically sent out my psychic tendrils, trying to calm the gerfalcon, but it was wild and frantic. It seized my shoulder, its talons digging into my flesh, and dragged me toward Calvin. I'm just angry, Calvin muttered in the distance, venting his emotions. I told you I was tired of you. I proposed to Lily, and you didn't even react. They said if the White Tower had assigned them to you, you would have been with them just the same. He roared, and the blizzard intensified, sweeping me and the gerfalcon high into the air. In your heart, I'm no different from anyone else. I was stunned by his twisted accusations. Was he trying to say he actually loved me? But because I wasn't with him by choice, he decided to give me the cold shoulder for 7 miserable years? If I weren't trapped in the gerfalcon's grip, I would have kicked him in the face. Calvin stared up at me, lost in his delusion. If you had just asked me to stay, I would have come back. What the hell? Just as my rage hit its peak, the crisis was resolved with startling simplicity. Someone walked into the blizzard. The gerfalcon suddenly vanished. I lost my balance and fell, landing in a familiar embrace. The wind and snow stopped, followed by an unnerving silence. I saw Calvin, a short distance away, collapse to his knees. A dark trail of blood trickled from his nose. Let her go, Calvin snarled, trying to use his power again. But as soon as he raised his hand, he was slammed to the ground by an unknown force, coughing up a mouthful of blood. What did you do? I asked, looking up at Leyon, who was holding me. Leyon's expression was innocent. I didn't do anything. He then looked toward Calvin. I just gave him a little tap with my psychic energy. How could that be? How could an S-class sentinel on the verge of going berserk be taken down by a little tap? It hit me. Are you really just an S-class? I asked Leyon. Leyon looked blank. Maybe a super S-class? Is that the highest? Juliet. Don't look at him. Look at me, Calvin yelled. He had always been so composed and proper. Now he was pinned to the ground, struggling pathetically, his face smeared with blood and dirt. I stepped out of Leyon's arms, walked over to Calvin, and knelt down. I'm only going to ask you this once, I said coldly. Did you ever touch Lily? Calvin's expression froze. The flicker of hope in his eyes quickly died. I didn't need his answer. You're pathetic, I said. The butler later told me that Leyon had shown signs of extremely sharp senses from a very young age, indicating immense talent. When his sentinel abilities awakened, his brain was so affected by the massive psychic fluctuations that his emotional intelligence was permanently frozen at that moment. When Count Guzin took him to the White Tower, the computer that was supposed to calculate his rank smoked and crashed. His power level had virtually no ceiling. To put it simply, he was a human nuclear bomb. If he ever went berserk, he could potentially destroy the entire country. The head of the guide division at the time tried to enter his mindscape but came out screaming in less than 3 seconds, his entire body smoking as if he'd been burned. S-class guides took turns trying, but they were all repelled by his mental barriers and suffered varying degrees of psychic damage. The White Tower's final conclusion was that he couldn't be stabilized. His mind couldn't mature, and he was a defective sentinel. He was deemed extremely dangerous, a potential time bomb. To protect his son, Count Guzin made a decision after consulting with the White Tower. Leyon would not enter the base for training, nor would he learn sentinel skills. And he would be placed under permanent house arrest at Cattail Manor, never to take a step outside. Oh my God, I exclaimed in shock. So that's why he couldn't go to the battlefield. The butler continued. The young master still experiences sensory overload from time to time, falling into the kind of chaotic state you saw when you first arrived. Since he can't be stabilized, he releases his pent-up emotions that way. He causes a ruckus for a while and then calms down on his own. It's always been like that. A poor sentinel, a poor child. He once held so much promise, only to be abandoned by his father and the very institution he was meant to serve. Then his family died in service to the country, leaving him all alone. Everyone thought he was a useless coward, but no one could have stopped him, yet he willingly stayed in his cage. If he can't be stabilized, why did the White Tower send me here? I asked, confused. And besides, I did stabilize him. The butler said, for that, you'll have to ask the young master himself. I went to see Leyon. He had hurt someone, so he had locked himself in the attic. When I climbed up, he was sitting on a narrow wooden bed, staring blankly at the moon outside the window. The room was dark, and the only light fell on his soft golden hair and pale face, making his features even more breathtaking. I held my breath, afraid to take another step. As if he knew what I was going to ask, Leyon spoke first. "You saved me 3 years ago." I was surprised. Someone as conspicuous as Leyon, if I had really saved him, I wouldn't have forgotten. That day, I received the notice of my uncle's death. He was my last living relative. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to end it all, to die on the same battlefield as my family. He had disguised himself as a soldier burned by artillery, wrapped himself in bandages, and snuck off to a recruitment center. Calvin and I happened to be there for a promotional event. Because his injuries looked so severe, the soldier at the registration desk refused to sign him up, saying he'd be useless. He argued, but the people behind him in line complained he was holding things up and called him a waste of space. In that instant, he was on the edge of a cliff. In his despair, he descended into chaos, just one step away from going berserk. Then I appeared. I gently took his hand. My psychic energy flowed into him like a gentle stream, my tendrils as soft as gauze. He was about to sink into a swamp of despair, but I lowered a spider's thread and gave him a way out. That was the first time he had ever been stabilized. I told him that going to war wasn't the only way to find his worth. The war would end, and people like us would have nowhere to go. His job was to live well and lead people like us into the future. That was the moment he fell deeply in love with me. Even though I was still someone else's guide at the time, he started planning for our future that very day. "I know all your favorites, the flowers you like, the books you love, your favorite fruits, the little animals you adore. I made Cattail Manor into a place you would love. I even cleaned up all the algae in the lake." The cage was no longer a cage. It was the foundation for a future. His eyes were like a moonlit sea, and a tidal wave of emotion crashed over me. "Thank God, I finally got you." In that moment, my affection for him reached its peak. I was almost grateful to the White Tower. He was still mumbling, "Even though I hurt Calvin, I don't regret it." "He did, sir." I silenced the rest of his words with my lips. I wanted to do something, so I released my most potent pheromones and tore through his mental barriers with lightning speed. A wickedness, sticky as tar, drew out his bonding fever. Did you know a guide can use her powers to control a sentinel's hardness and frequency? I pushed him down onto the narrow wooden bed. I kissed his hazy, bewildered eyes, my fingers tracing the sharply rising hills and valleys of his chest. "Wanna try?" Leyon and I had a beautiful wedding. The butler said Leyon had been preparing for it for 3 years. The ceremony was dreamlike, lavish, and grand, beyond anything I could have imagined. Calvin was taken into custody by the guards for disturbing the peace at Cattail Manor and was confined, so he missed the wedding day. Later, I heard he didn't marry Lily. Instead, he was transferred to a conflict zone to deal with terrorists. Lily ended up at the Guide Institute working in logistics. My relationship with Leyon progressed smoothly. Once his mindscape opened completely to me, we bonded. I got pregnant within 6 months of our marriage. A little over 9 months later, I gave birth to our daughter, Chloe. The 3 of us lived a quiet and happy life at Cattail Manor. I thought Calvin would disappear from my life for good, but 5 years later, he came back. Calvin was unconscious when he was brought to Cattail Manor. The people who brought him said he had been severely injured in a recent large-scale terrorist attack. His memory was scrambled, and he had forgotten everything from the last decade, believing he and I had just been paired. His mindscape was shattered, and he couldn't even manifest his spirit animal. Any further shock could end his life as a sentinel. The White Tower's intention was to leave him in my care. They couldn't just lose an S-class sentinel. Like hell I cared. It would be better if he died. But the people from the White Tower were firm. They dropped Calvin off and left, giving me no chance to refuse. I couldn't directly defy an order from the White Tower, so I took Chloe back to our room. Calvin's body lay at the main gate for 4 hours, growing cold. He eventually woke up on his own. He stumbled around in a daze and saw me in the garden having afternoon tea. He immediately wrapped me in a tight, desperate hug. His eyes were bloodshot, and his voice trembled along with his body. I thought I'd never see you again. When the poison bomb went off next to me, all I could see was your face. He was lost in his own emotional turmoil. I couldn't help myself. I splashed my hot tea in his face. He wiped his face haphazardly, only then noticing Chloe and Leyon sitting next to me. He froze. Because of what had happened before, Leyon detested him. Calvin let go of me, cleared his throat, and reverted to his cold, self-possessed demeanor. Hello. And you are? Leyon curled his lip in a distant smile. Leyon. Chloe played along. Chloe. When Calvin saw Chloe, he visibly relaxed, then put on an embarrassed expression. You must be Juliet's little brother. You can call me your brother-in-law. Oh my God. How blind could he be to mistake a blonde European man for the brother of a dark-haired woman from the East? And did he not think Chloe looked like me? Before I could even voice my disbelief, Leyon's psychic energy spiraled out of control. The pressure in the room dropped heavily. Calvin fainted again. Calvin was like a cockroach that refused to die. I don't know where he found a place to stay, but he managed to hang around Cattail Manor for 2 weeks. I didn't provide him with any stabilization during that time, yet his mental state somehow improved day by day. I had him thrown out. He'd show up again the next day, though he'd inexplicably have a limp from a fall in the garden, and his arms would be covered in fresh scratches from thorns. No one paid him any attention, but he constantly acted as if he were my paired sentinel, proposing to me at random moments. It was incredibly annoying. He was starting to get on Leyon's nerves. I caught Leyon with a dark, brooding expression several times. Whenever Calvin appeared, Leyon would deliberately run over, kiss me on the lips, and spin me around a few times to show his jealousy. I enjoyed it. Calvin was in deep denial. He reasoned that Europeans were more open and a kiss was just a form of greeting. And with that, his twisted logic was complete. He would try to bribe Chloe with lollipops to call him uncle. Even when Chloe told him she only had a mommy and a daddy, no aunts or uncles. One night, Leyon and I got carried away in the study, knocking over a pile of books. Calvin just knocked on the door and told us not to fight. Maybe he couldn't even fool himself anymore. Under the constant barrage of my and Leyon's intimacy, he grew anxious, following me everywhere, terrified of witnessing another display of physical affection that would push him over the edge. Soon, dark circles appeared under his eyes, and he seemed perpetually dazed. He desperately needed stabilization, and he was even developing physical symptoms. His teeth would chatter, and he was constantly breaking out in cold sweats. He asked me to hug him. I refused and told him, "I'm tired of you." He hunched over, looking as sad as a kicked dog. It was all so pointless. He seemed terrified of Leyon, even developing phantom pains. Whenever Leyon touched him, he would flinch and tremble in pain. I could feel the extreme tension in his psychic energy, a wave of pain so intense I had only ever sensed it from people who had been burned over their entire bodies. Leyon took the opportunity to report to the White Tower that Cattail Manor was not suitable for Calvin's recovery and suggested he be sent back for proper treatment. Calvin refused. He pathetically grabbed my hand and professed his love for me, completely lost in his own self-pity. According to him, he had seen his true heart after his near-death experience. He had lost so much and now wanted to pursue true happiness. I actually fell for you the moment I arrived at the White Tower. The night the pairing list came out, I was too excited to sleep. They said the White Tower had you try out other sentinels before finally choosing me. I shouldn't have been so cold to you. Thank God I came to my senses in time. You love me too, don't you? Juliet, let's go home and get married. I just saw him as a clown. I used my psychic control to force him into a hypnotized sleep. Then I turned and pressed Leyon, whose eyes had reddened, against the wall, kissing him again and again to show him that my heart had never wavered. In the 5 years we had been living together in harmony, I had come to know him inside and out. Soothing him was easy. I did like him once, but that's all in the past tense, I said sincerely. My heart belongs only to you now. But he wiped his tears and told me, I'm not jealous. Why wasn't I the one you met first? If it had been me, I would have protected you. I would have told them they were just jealous. I wouldn't have let my stupid pride make me shut you out and hurt you. Ah, was I hurt? The truth was I had used my pride, my duty, and my guide's stability to box up my pain, not allowing it to cross any lines. But that seemingly solid frame had cracked in front of Leyon, who cherished me with all his heart. A sourness welled up, and the pain transformed into love. It was like an avalanche, a devastating flood, immense, destructive. Yet it all culminated in a kiss as gentle as a spring rain. I'm not hurt anymore, because I met you. I kissed his tears away. My Leyon. I couldn't let Calvin be an eyesore here any longer. I thought for a moment, then sent for Lily. Calvin's face paled slightly for some reason, but he still greeted her cheerfully. I don't know what they talked about, but Lily ran off with a ghostly white face, crying, "I'll never forgive you." The state she was in didn't seem right. I should have been the one to go after her, but something felt off. I asked Leyon to go after her while I went to check on Calvin. Leyon, worried that Calvin might lose control and harm me, had the butler follow me closely. Calvin was, as expected, devastated. When I found him, his eyes were bloodshot, and he gripped my arms tightly. "She's lying, right? How could I ever give you up?" His grip was incredibly strong. I was surprised to see horrific wounds peeking out from under his sleeves. They were the kind of scratches a person inflicts on themselves in extreme agony. And I glanced at him, forcing myself to remain calm as I pulled my arms free. "It's true. And I'm married now. Chloe is my and Leyon's daughter." Calvin started to tremble. "I don't believe you. You're lying." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. "You, don't be with him, please. I'm begging you. I'm begging you." Calvin swayed on his feet and then suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. Disgusted, I immediately shoved him away. I had learned my lesson. I immediately used my psychic control, forcing him into a deep sleep. Once he was completely unconscious, I contacted the White Tower to have someone come and take him away. It was finally over. It rained that night. The sound of the rain made it hard to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw the window was slightly ajar, so I got up to close it. Through the window, I saw Calvin standing downstairs, staring blankly up at my window. The rain washed his face pale, making him look like a corpse that had crawled out of its grave. Chloe was a sensitive sleeper, even the sound of rain could disturb her. So I drew the curtains, so he wouldn't disturb my daughter's sweet dreams. Calvin went insane. Before the people from the White Tower could come for him, he kidnapped Chloe and ran. He had been circling me for days, and no one thought he would suddenly snap, which gave him the opportunity to strike. I had never seen Leyon's face look so terrifying. He probably regretted not dealing with Calvin sooner, worried that Chloe would get caught in the crossfire. He could only chase Calvin all the way to the city center. The incident blew up. Because Calvin was an S-class sentinel and it involved the heir of the Guzin family, a horde of reporters showed up at the scene. "I left you a note. I told you to come alone." Calvin screamed from the middle of the city square, holding a knife to Chloe's throat. "Why didn't you read it?" My back was slick with sweat. I kept my eyes on the knife in Calvin's hand, trying to calm him down while slowly inching closer. Calvin wasn't listening. He seemed to be running out of time. Even though he had already failed once against Leyon, he was still willing to risk it all. Chloe was crying. The people in the crowd, feeling sorry for Chloe, yelled insults at Calvin. Some who had heard the rumors about Leyon also shouted at him, calling him a loser who couldn't even protect his own daughter. The verbal abuse seemed to make Leyon nervous. Amid the shouting, he tried to contact the White Tower, dropping his phone several times. But I saw the cold glint in Leyon's eyes, a murderous intent that chilled me to the bone. Spurred on by Leyon's stare, Calvin suddenly ripped open his shirt, revealing a body covered in scars. A blizzard erupted, drowning out his furious curses. The terrifying storm was far more severe than his last episode, and the entire square was engulfed. The gerfalcon shot into the sky, and the reporters' cameras were knocked over by the gale. Everyone was forced to shut their eyes against the wind. In the whiteout, I quickly extended my psychic tendrils, pinpointing Calvin and Chloe's location, and lunged toward them. I saw Calvin. His limbs were actually frozen solid. How could his own power be hurting him? I didn't have time to think. I snatched Chloe away from him. Calvin's arm was still around her waist, and with a crisp snap, his frozen hand shattered into pieces. Calvin looked at me, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Then he completely lost control. Ice crept up his face as he lost the last of his humanity. I could feel his psychic energy rampaging wildly, and the bone-chilling wind even cut my cheek. The ice under his feet spread outwards. At his current level, the entire square would become a frozen tundra, and the surrounding skyscrapers would be turned into giant icicles. Leave it to me. Leyon appeared behind me and patted my shoulder reassuringly. You take the child and go. Nothing will happen. I had some idea of Leyon's abilities, so I nodded and retreated. After I had gotten Chloe and as many people as I could pull to a safe distance from the center of the chaos, I heard a roar from within the blizzard. A giant golden lion reared its head from the storm. It was Leyon's spirit animal. For the first time in all these years, I saw it outside of his mindscape. The beast of ice and snow fought with the golden lion. The entire ground shook. I heard a bystander who had stopped in his tracks ask in a daze, Is that the S-Class reject? I wanted to say yes, but also no. The battle between a Super S-Class and an S-Class was a complete domination. I watched as the golden lion tore the snow beast to shreds in less than 3 minutes. Many people captured the scene on their cameras. When the battle ended, the blizzard disappeared, and the golden light gradually faded. Leyon stood quietly in the center of it all. Just as everyone was about to rush toward him, they noticed the person lying on the ground opposite him. Calvin. He had fallen. His limbs were broken, his mindscape completely shattered. His senses were sealed off, and he had sunk into the black hole of his own soul. He lay there, staring at the sky, not even blinking as snowflakes landed on his eyelashes. Once someone enters the black hole, they can never escape. He would probably be like that for the rest of his life. Leyon suddenly bent down, produced a blue rose from somewhere, and placed it on Calvin's chest. As he bent over, his face was reflected in Calvin's eyes. I couldn't tell if Calvin saw him or not. The tense atmosphere broke, and the crowd erupted in cheers for their merciful hero. But when I saw that beautiful blue rose, my heart began to pound wildly in my chest. Chloe clung tightly to my neck, still trembling, unable to understand why the uncle who had been so kind just days ago would do this to her. I comforted her and let out a soft sigh of relief. No matter what, Calvin would never bother us again. My eyes grew misty. Every ending is a new beginning. Leyon was looking back at me. I reached my hand out to him. Thank God I made the right choice. Epilogue. I am the third son of the Guzin family. As is tradition, I was destined to handle the family's dark affairs. Before my sentinel abilities awakened, I was more accustomed to using a gun. A bullet spins as it leaves the barrel, crosses hundreds of meters, and in a fraction of a second, rips through skin, bone, and brain matter. They say that in the instant of death, a person's thoughts accelerate, and time stretches to infinity. I sometimes wondered what that person thought about as that hot piece of metal spun inside their brain. I awakened as a sentinel at 15 while dealing with a traitor. When his blood splattered on my face, I could feel it evaporating. In that magical instant, I suddenly felt something called psychic energy. It was scalding, painful. I was like a volcano about to erupt, lava churning in every vein. That day, the interrogation room in the basement of Cattail Manor, along with the person inside it, was reduced to ash. I was more useful than before. My father sent me to the White Tower. However, I was not trained openly. The White Tower's tests identified me as a dark sentinel, one who requires no guide and is best suited for the art of assassination. Things like inflicting untraceable damage on a person using only gravitational force, or detonating a psychic blast inside a human body to completely destroy their mindscape, or even replicating an opponent's ability to create the illusion of self-destruction. The White Tower had many people it couldn't deal with openly. High-ranking officials who held important positions, but engaged in criminal activities in secret decorated war heroes with a penchant for torture and murder business tycoons who funded terrorist celebrity philanthropists, who colluded with underground networks to traffic female refugees. All these people entered hell at my hands. I had no issue with this life, it was how I had been raised since childhood. My father was an expert in the art of dehumanization. I had no name, he called me my sword. I did not cry, because tears only brought punishment. I had no toys. The interrogation room was my playground. A human life was just a number to me. I should not have felt pain. Not until I met her. The story I told Juliet was half truth, half lie. The recruitment center wasn't the first time we met. I had watched her from the shadows before. I was on a mission to assassinate a government official who had embezzled military funds. As it turned out, the official had already been kidnapped. Juliet, who was there for a visit, was also taken hostage. Calvin wasn't there. 4 or 5 kidnappers had them surrounded in the living room. The men and women of the household were trembling with fear, but Juliet was different. She calmly held a blonde boy of about 10, soothing him with a gentle voice. That blonde boy's name was Leyon. I had his file. He had lost his mother at a young age and was frail and sickly, which also made him prone to tears. In the 3 or 4 hours I observed them, he was constantly crying. And whenever he cried, Juliet would find a way to get what he wanted from the ruthless kidnappers. He got medicine, an apple, a blanket, a picture book, and many, many kisses. She said, "Leyon, you're a lion, a little golden lion. Sickness didn't kill you, loneliness didn't kill you, so these people can't kill you either. All this suffering is just a prelude. You will be rewarded. You will be happier than anyone." The frail Leyon, the tearful Leyon, looked at her with a blush on his face. I could hear the pounding of his heart. It was just like mine. When I returned from my mission that day, I asked my father for a reward for the first time. He looked at me with great interest and asked what I wanted. "Juliet," I said. I had done my research. At the time, Juliet was just a 17-year-old girl. She didn't have a bonded sentinel yet. My father agreed. Then, the White Tower announced that Juliet and Calvin had been paired. I knew, of course, that this was my father's way of punishing me. I was not permitted to have humanity. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, recalling the image of that teary-eyed blonde boy. Imitating him was simple. My eyes quickly filled with tears. I decided to give myself a name. You are a little golden lion. You are Leyon. You will overcome this. Whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So, when I was the only one left in the Guzin family, I was actually very happy. I deliberately disguised myself and went to the recruitment center where Juliet was, wanting to go to the same battlefield as her. I had to be ready to replace Calvin the moment he died and pair with her. Unfortunately, I didn't succeed. But that was indeed the first time I was ever stabilized. Confirmed my desire. I wanted her love. I wanted everything she was. With my father dead, no one could control me anymore. I buried the past of Cattail Manor. The assassin became the butler, the torturers became maids, and the interrogation room was transformed into a lake and a cattle pen. I began to cultivate the image of a useless S-class reject, preparing for my retirement. I no longer hoped for Calvin's death in battle, but I also didn't want to be sent to a military tribunal for murdering a war hero. So I found Lily. The childhood sweetheart Calvin had once fancied was now just a desperate refugee. I taught her, step by step, how to subtly drive a wedge between Calvin and Juliet without ever even meeting them, and how to make that foolish, battle-obsessed sentinel fall into her arms. Lily did an excellent job. She even secretly used aphrodisiacs and had a physical relationship with Calvin. Then she faked a pregnancy to force him to propose. The very day Juliet and Calvin dissolved their pairing, I immediately submitted an application to the White Tower, securing my engagement to Juliet. The White Tower couldn't refuse. They might still need me, and I had plenty of leverage on them. Juliet arrived. The version of me she saw was a carefully crafted image. My clothes, the scenes where I spoke, the angle of my chin, even my loss of control, my helplessness, my purity and kindness. As expected, she pitied me. For my sake, She even harshly rejected Calvin, who had come to his senses and rushed to her side. After Calvin went berserk, was confined, and confronted the White Tower, he discovered Lily's true motives. I demanded that the White Tower deploy him to a conflict zone. He would never bother us again. Our life together was wonderful. I was willing to live as Leyon, happy like this forever. Until Calvin was severely injured in a neutral zone and sent by the White Tower to Cattail Manor. The White Tower was playing a double game. It gave me the opportunity to kill Calvin and eliminate the problem for good. At the same time, it secretly ordered Calvin to deliver a message to Juliet. The White Tower planned to expose my entire past to Juliet and demand that she kill me. That way, their dirty secrets would be buried in darkness forever. After we bonded, our compatibility rate reached 100%. She could freely explore my mind, control my nerves, and easily give me a fatal suggestion. With Calvin arriving on this mission, there was no need for me to hide anymore. I let Calvin stay, watching him play the fool. Every night, I would take him away for harsh interrogation, forcing him to reveal the White Tower's entire plan. After all, a memory-addled idiot was unlikely to tattle. Of course, I was also very kind. While I used my psychic energy to make him feel the pain of being torn apart inch by inch, I also used medication to repair his mindscape, to prevent him from overstaying his welcome at Cattail Manor. Calvin, an S-class sentinel who had unbound himself from his dedicated guide, was already suffering from the physical symptoms of pheromone withdrawal. I took great pleasure in seeing his face pale, his body drenched in cold sweat, curled up in pain, his teeth chattering as he writhed on the ground. It brought back a small, hidden joy. Naturally, whenever Juliet was near him, I never left her side. If I wasn't there, I had the butler accompany her. I gave Calvin no opportunity for a private conversation with Juliet. I deliberately provoked Juliet, leading her to bring Lily back. Lily's arrival started the countdown for Calvin's mission, and he learned from Lily, to his despair, that I already knew everything. Unwilling to accept defeat, he resorted to extreme measures. I used Chloe. I am not a good father, but I was tired of the White Tower's probing, and I didn't want Juliet to hold any illusions about them anymore. I let Calvin escape to the city center and attract the media. Calvin wanted to blow the situation up and expose my true face to everyone. This was what I wanted the White Tower to see. Because more than they feared my exposure, the White Tower feared the world seeing their own ugliness. The moment I publicly picked up my communicator, the White Tower made its choice. I could wash away my own stains and re-enter the public eye with a glorious image. I first used Calvin's own ability against him to stop him from revealing the truth. When he was forced to retaliate, I destroyed his mindscape from the inside with lightning speed, forcing him to go berserk. Then I unleashed my spirit animal, which I had never shown to anyone, and won the battle. I would shed the title of the S-Class Reject. Calvin's spirit fell completely into the black hole. His body would do nothing but breathe for the rest of his life. As for Lily, she probably won't be showing her face to Juliet ever again. I suddenly remembered the note Calvin had shouted about. Could he have written everything down on a piece of paper and secretly slipped it to Juliet? I turned to look at Juliet. She was holding Chloe, and when our eyes met, there was a flicker of panic in hers, but it quickly turned to resolve. She already knew, but she had made her choice. I let out a breath of relief and smiled at her. My darling, my beloved Juliet, the war didn't kill us, loneliness didn't kill us. All the suffering was just a prelude. We will be happier than anyone.